Buenos días a todos, bienvenidos al evento América Sostenible. Mi nombre es Juan Fernando Montenegro y yo los estaré acompañando en el Esta. La siguiente conferencia es en inglés. En unos minutos empezaremos. Para empezar, quisiera agradecer a nuestros patrocinadores y alianzas que hicieron posible este evento. Como otro punto, al lado derecho de su pantalla encontrarán el panel de comunicación. Si hacen clic en la pestaña de sesión, podrán escribir en el chat cualquier duda o comentario. Yo estas las leeré al final de la presentación. Bienvenidos a la charla de Office Reset, Reapertura de espacios de trabajo. Esta será realizada por Joe Pettipas y Barry Nathan de IBI Group. Joe Pettipas es director global de diseño de interiores de IBI Group. Cuenta con más de 3 décadas de experiencia en la industria de diseño, en proyectos internacionales, institucionales, hospitalarios, comerciales y médicos. La experiencia internacional en Medio Oriente, Asia, Europa, Sudamérica le da a Joe una amplia apreciación de la importancia de las comunidades, soluciones inteligentes, la marca y cómo tienen que sintetizarse en el medio constructivo para realizar resultados exitosos. Barry Nathan tiene más de 30 años de experiencia tanto en arquitectura como en diseño de interiores, lo que ha dado como resultado un flujo imperceptible entre ambas disciplinas. Su trabajo se enfoca en proyectos de comercio especializados en espacio público, educación superior y entornos académicos. Los acercamientos alternativos al diseño han permitido a Barry promover soluciones únicas y creativas para clientes con ideas progresivas. Su experiencia en proyectos en la industria de la construcción es un recurso valioso para cualquier equipo de trabajo. Sus proyectos más recientes han ganado numerosos premios tanto en Canadá como en Estados Unidos. Thank you so much, Joe and Barry, for being with us today. Now I will give you the controls so you can share your camera and presentation.
That's great. Thank you, Juan Fernando. We appreciate it very much. And good morning to everybody, and buenos dias. I hope everybody's having a good morning so far. So I'm going to share our screen here. And, or at least I'm going to try to share a screen here. Here we go. Juan Fernando, can you see this?
Yes, we can see perfect and hear you perfect.
Okay, perfecto. Gracias. So thank you very much for sharing some time with Barry and I this morning. What we're going to talk about is, in fact, our experience and the path that we have traveled within our corporation. In looking to understand what the effects of COVID and the pandemic have had on our operations, but moreover, how we might reoccupy our office. So just for a few seconds, if I may, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to spend a couple of moments just describing who IBI is. We are number 6 world's largest architecture practice. We have offices around the world, 60 offices approximately. We have the closest office to Guatemala is our Mexico City office. We also have one in the Caribbean, St. Augustine. And IB&I, although originally was the 3 partners within the organization, over the last decade or so, we have rebranded the organization, and I is intelligence, B is buildings, and the other I is infrastructure. So we practice across many different platforms within architecture, interior design, and within those, healthcare, education, corporate workplace, hospitality, residential, and a number of others. Within infrastructure, we are very focused on smart cities and smart city building. and creating with our clients solutions for the management, the development, the design, the development, and the management of the spaces and the places that we as human beings occupy within cities and abroad. Our intelligence sector is fundamentally focused around a number of developments. We have a group that works on highway toll systems, another group that works on managing and engaging with cities in water consumption, electrical consumption and development, etc. So it's quite a broad organization. Our head office for the global practice is in Toronto, in Canada, and Barry and I are both based there. So as I mentioned earlier, what this presentation today is really the journey that we have taken as we look forward to reoccupying our offices around the globe. Last March, like most people, most countries in the world, everything ground to a halt. And in Canada specifically, we were all sent home somewhere around March the 12th and told that we would have to function, continue our business, but do it from the privacy of our own homes. And over the last 7 months, we've learned an enormous amount of lessons about the ability to foster communication, to continue to develop our culture as an organization, but also in delivering the work that we do with our clients. We have found, interestingly enough, that we have an increased productivity currently, and we are very fortunate in that it has not slowed down our business nor our continued growth within our professions. So just to overview, these are the 6 steps that we determined with the engagement of an outside medical consultant and a psychologist, as well as our human resources department. These are the 6 steps that we decided and determined were necessary for us to understand and to apply to how we might reoccupy an office space. So the first one, staff surveys, is really to understand what the workforce's concerns were relative to a pandemic or COVID, but also how people were feeling with this new experiment of working from home. And we also looked at how and when our staff were traveling to their offices, to the workplace, because public transportation has been a significant concern for many of our employees, especially in larger metropolitan areas. So the first level was staff surveys. The second level, and we'll go into these all a little bit in more depth through the presentation. The second was reconfiguring the workplace. So how would we occupy? For example, how do you manage physical distancing within an office scenario? How do you manage the use of common spaces such as meeting rooms, lunch rooms, lobbies, frankly, elevators, and what were those? And we've developed a few tools that enabled us to be able to look at that very efficiently and very effectively. Item 3, or step 3, was really developing a communication strategy so that we could speak to our employees and to understand who was interested in coming into the office, when they were interested in coming into the office, and for what purposes. Was it because they perhaps could not work very efficiently at home, or were they coming in only for meetings and potentially social? So we looked at that and developing a strategy to talk to them. We've also developed an app, which we'll illustrate in That's step number 4, which is enabling staff to book desks and meeting rooms. We have made a determination currently that we will not have assigned seating within the office, that while the pandemic is on and when we should return, and we have not yet decided to return to the office fully, but that individuals would book a desk for a period of time, an hour, 2 hours, a day, a couple of days, which all includes number 5, which is the web-based form that they can self-report whether in fact they have been affected by COVID, whether they've been around someone who's had COVID, whether they're not feeling well, or any of those items. And similarly, we can also now track through the app the cleaning compliance. So for example, we have a heightened cleaning process where if someone uses a desk for a period of time, it takes the desk offline. It notifies the cleaning staff, and the cleaning staff then know that that desk needs to be cleaned, sanitized, and they can in fact go and undertake that effort. And then they, through their acceptance that it's been cleaned, re-energize the desk so that it becomes available on the app. So as I had mentioned, our initial thoughts were staff surveys, and some of this data is quite interesting. And this is based on our Toronto head office, so global head office. And it's based on, we have 2 offices in Toronto. Our Toronto main office has 700 people, and our Toronto West office has approximately 107 people. So one of the first questions was, what was the average travel distance from their, for one way, from your home to your work? And as you can see, and the turquoise color, the teal blue, speaks very particularly to the Toronto, the larger office. 15% of our people live within 5 kilometers of the office. And then it continues on. And at that time, even 8% of our people lived 50 kilometers or more away. So it was quite interesting that within 15 kilometers, we had approximately 60% of our staff who lived within 15 kilometers of the office. And when we look at the second chart on the right, the modes of transportation that they regularly used, fully, almost a third of our people in the Toronto head office walked to work, those being mostly the ones living under 10 kilometers. Almost 400 people took the subway. And I mentioned earlier, public transportation is of a concern. The streetcar is 94 people. And then with the exception of driving and or a bus, the majority of people, or very little people, actually take alternate transportation. So it's walking, the subway, streetcar, approximately a quarter of the people drive, and then the rest took another public transportation. We asked them the question, in the future, if the option was available, would they like to work from home? And the average, interestingly enough, was that most people would like to work from home 2 to 3 days a week. Some people would like to work from home forever, and some people would rather not work from home at all. And I think that also reflects our society, and being in a large metropolitan city, some of the concerns, if you if you have a partner, a wife or a husband or a spouse, if you live in a very small urban downtown apartment, it might be quite difficult for 2 people to work from home. However, if you have a larger residence and the ability to create a work from home office, it actually makes it easier. And we found that the majority of our employees were quite comfortable with maintaining some type of work from home in the future. We also asked them about desk ownership within the office and whether they would be comfortable with sharing a desk, i.e. not owning a desk, but rather booking some type of desking or seating. And approximately 60% on average said they'd be comfortable with hoteling, and I'm using that term carefully, whereas 40% were not comfortable with that. They wanted to maintain their desk. As we delved into that a little closer, we also understood that there was a fair amount of concern about the spread of infection by sharing seats. What we know now about the pros and cons of the home office, for us, approximately 91% of our company has adapted well to that change. And 60% are open to hot desking, as I mentioned. And you can read some of the favorable reviews. I'm able to balance my work and personal life more effectively if I work from home. Feel more motivated working remotely. What I also like to look at is the bottom of the left chart, and that is the last two, and that individuals felt that the product or the deliverables to the client still was higher working remotely. But if you notice the bottom one, I feel more connected to colleagues, was overwhelmingly disagreed with. Over 60% of our staff said they feel a disconnection in working from home full time. So I'm going to pass the screen over to Barry, and Barry's going to speak to Parametric Modeling, which is one of the software systems and processes that we used to be able to analyze our office space for occupancy. Barry?
Thank you, Joe, and good morning, everybody. Parametric modeling, it's a software and analytical tool that we've been utilizing for design in the past. It's an algorithm based on Grasshopper and a couple other programs that is basically put together to look at physical parameters of space. So in our process, we were needing to analyze physical distancing or social distancing on a mass level for all of our offices in a very, very quick time. So imagine 60 locations and over a period of a week having to look at how certain health and safety protocols could really optimize those plans. And we put in protocols such as 2 meter spacing or 6 feet. We put in primary circulation corridors, and we looked at really what the implications might be for occupied space. And in this case, we looked at different shifts might be working on different days, and they might have different locations. And the notion of really how that would give a percentage of occupancy for future return to office. So the beauty of this is, as a tool, it allows changes for the health and safety protocols to happen, and they can basically happen in seconds when the program is run. So you can change your inputs, you can change your parameters, and this is something that actually works in the background in almost a live time. And it's a very effective client tool as well that we've been looking at assisting other firms in returning back to their offices. So just as an analysis, it can tell you from not only personal space to shared spaces, how much a meeting room can be occupied. It can tell you what you should be closing off in terms of compromised areas as well. We can also analyze things like washroom capacity, elevator lobbies, and public spaces with this tool. So that's kind of a high-level overview. This is one of the first, I guess, analytical processes we had to do for the return back to the office. So we'll move on to where this takes us next. So once those plans were developed and we had the background information, we took this into what we're calling our app that we had developed, which is our N-Space app. So maybe, Joe, we can move the slide on to the next one. we, as a technology-driven company, we have a group that specifically on the intelligence side has been working on software development and was able to quickly mobilize and put together a digital desk booking platform that was catered to I guess the challenges COVID had brought to the everyone's attention. And really the most important things that came to mind was health and safety for employees and giving that sort of confidence that they might want to return. So all of a sudden, you know, majority of companies, specifically ourselves, were confronted with the issue of how do you really solve immediate questions that came to mind. And those challenges really were 4 points here. So we're saying, you know, maintaining physical distance between staff, understanding where, if there is an infection or compromised individuals, where they've been and how do you track that, looking at protocols in place to kind of manage health and safety risks. And then the obvious one is allowing a platform for people to book space on when they come in and how they do within groups. So these were all the most sort of, you know, immediate questions that came to mind that we felt would be solved by this app. So as we kind of move through the opportunities from it, there were scenarios. So our main headquarters, 800 staff. If we're finding the parametric planning that was resultant from what I previously showed you, that gave us around a ratio of 20 to 30% occupancy from a safe perspective when physical distancing is analyzed. So all of a sudden you're limited on your availability for desks and areas that can be booked. So you look at the needs. The needs of every individual will be unique, whether they're coming into, as Joe mentioned, collaborative work, or they're coming into production because they're compromised at home, or if they're just concerned about where they are able to work in terms of cleanliness. And all of these scenarios had to be looked at as we went through. Go to the next slide. The development behind the app, and this is really the sort of the premise or the concept of it, was looking at physical time in terms of how you occupy space, the protocols that will regulate the experience or use of space, and then where that will happen within an environment. And that's sort of where the end space environment and the actual app term came from. Now, this is something that will be, traditionally, it would be used on your smartphone. It could be desktop if required, but the idea is that it's portable. It works on QR codes. And the idea is this is the screen that would come up and it would show you your office. You can go specifically by building to a floor. You can look at where on that floor availability is, and it'll show you the workplace that would be potential, whether it's based on a shift or on a time perspective that you could book. And you can also see which ones are unbookable from this. So it's very clear as to sort of how you can manage your occupancy and how this background, which would be the parametric plan, which we showed you, would be updated as changes might occur as well. So it's connected as an interface. And the notion is that all teams and staff will have different needs. So the availability of each staff might have different requirements. So the notion of the first step is once you go into it, you would have to complete a self-declaration form. And the declaration would be a series of health and safety questions. Once you have answered that you are, in agreement to that, you would be allowed to book space. So at least that manages the control of whom would be coming in and their wellness from a liability perspective and also just from a tracking perspective. And then it also can track as to sort of where they've been in terms of what spaces they booked within the app. And that will tell you the spot of whom is where that day. The cleaning compliance, as Joe mentioned earlier, this is something that once it is connected through the smartphone to the cleaning company or provider, they would go in and they would understand sort of which desks have been utilized at what time. It sends a message to them because the app runs on a QR code, and the idea is that it just the code would be scanned when someone books a space and they arrive, and when they leave, they scan that code again. It would be like a sticker on their desk. It goes to the cleaning company, and the cleaning company would then understand that would be a priority. And once they've cleaned, they would also scan the code, and it would come back into the app as to when it was cleaned and show that it is safe to go back to that location. Go to the next slide. And that summarizes the app in terms of its, I guess, simplicity of use. Really, there's no extra hardware required for this. The idea was it was very easy to have people navigate, and it allows that safe ability to return.
it's also important, Barry, to add that the app is available on Apple and Google. It's a free download. We developed that app not only for use in our own offices, although that was the driver, but also because we believe that it might be of value and of use to others. So as I mentioned, it is available, and will have and does have capacity once you download it. So just as a sort of, if you will, a wrap up or a summation, what we're doing now is we're still within our current state audit. We're understanding through surveys our employee experience. As I mentioned, it's been 7+ months since we've been working from home. We have noticed that the social and cultural connections as an organization are one of the things that are challenged when we work apart. We're being very cognizant of our employees' emotional well-being, and how they're dealing with not only working from home, but rather all of the various issues that are going on in the world at the moment, and how they are affecting them and their ability to function. And very aware of something called Zoom fatigue. I don't know about the attendees here, but I know that I spend approximately, on average, 10 hours a day on video conferencing, which means that whilst I'm getting some connection to the people that I'm talking to, it also is very draining because you're technically always on. You're on display, you're in a conversation, you're trying to look attentive, and also the one thing that we found that's also interesting from Zoom fatigue is when people look in your calendars and they find you have a half an hour, they will book a chat with you. So it also has meant that we've had to figure out new ways of managing our own personal time so that we don't create or add to burnout. Barry was speaking to the N-Space app, and it's really all about and the backbone of our safe return plan. We have base building protocols. We've worked with the landlord or the building owner in all of our properties to undertake some interventions like increased air handling and airflow, looking at protocols around how many people can enter the building at a certain point in time, what are the elevator usage rules and regulations, would they consider putting in touchless handles, door opening, and those types of things. We've been looking at hoteling versus shift work. Hoteling being a free range seat, shift work being that we have a group of people who work from 7 till 3 and a group who how we building. We occupy 7 floors in the building that we're in, and how do we actually enable our staff to be able to travel through the building vertically? Is that only on the elevators? Do we assign stairwells to go in certain directions? One stairwell goes up, one stairwell goes down, etc. And then what the general policies are around all of these. So our next step in this is really our communication strategy, which we're in process. We have wayfinding and signage that we've developed for the employees within each of the offices. We have health and safety standards and guidelines, which speaks to protective personal equipment, masking and others, hand washing, cleaning, creating, as I said, a touchless experience as much as possible, ensuring that people are physically distant, changing out some of our furniture and furnishings and layouts in our plans, and increased HVAC, so heating and ventilation and cooling. And we're using their technology to describe the fixed versus mobile, and to create a resiliency within our offices that enhance flexibility and that are adaptive to future issues that may arise.
And Joe, maybe I'll just add while you're on that's the slide, the background images you're seeing on these slides are in fact a space that we have developed which embraces all of these changes that Joe is describing for the next. It's called a Sandbox Space, but the notion is it's a technology-enabled space that has resilience and flexibility built in to anticipate some of the things that have actually been happening over the last 6 months. And it enables, I guess, the ability of changing and reconfiguring quite easily, and having a staff come in and use it for multiple considerations while still having, physical distancing, with technology and censoring and all of the tools that we're working on being sort of tested in the background. So this is an example of how we're practicing what we're discussing. Just thought I'd add it in.
Thank you, Barry. So, as we move towards tomorrow, one of the things that we're doing now at the senior level is we're looking at and thinking about our real estate. IBI does not own any building that it occupies. We lease all of our premises around the world. And we're really starting to analyze and needing to analyze, does this new way, a potentially new occupancy, will this occupancy style continue on? We believe it will. Does that mean we might need less space because we will have less people who will be in the office on a regular basis? Or does it mean that we might need more space because we will want to maintain some reasonable sense of physical distancing even after there's a cure for the pandemic? We haven't made that final decision yet, but we're doing a lot of analysis work on that. And really, we're trying to understand, first and foremost, what is the purpose of an office? What purpose does it serve? And, we've come up with these numbers of items. One, that it's a shared work experience. So it's a place where people come together to share the work. It has to be a desirable destination, and Barry's point about the sandbox is one. Ultimately, it's to foster ideas. It's to create a cultural hub. So this is back to who are you as an organization, and how do you promote and build and develop your employees' buy-in into your organization. And we need to be able to seamlessly control this so that it's not an impediment to people being there, but rather it's an enhancement. And through our analysis and through the work that we've done to date, we are leaning towards finding that space will be less personal. It'll ultimately be more social. It'll need to be much more adaptive, because we have quickly realized in working from home that our geographies no longer mean what they used to mean. And what I mean by that is we are finding that we are sharing our project work across many more offices and building teams across many more offices because we're all virtual now. So in contemplating the future, we pose a few questions at the end of this just to sort of start the conversation. And really, the first question is the home office here to stay? Will people be expected future that they will need to undertake some of their work for an organization from their personal space, from their home? And if that be the case, then what is the role of the office in the future? And the two questions that I raised earlier, do you grow your real estate to support physical distancing, or do you reduce it to reflect a decreased day-to-day occupancy? I think this question will be answered by many different, in many different ways by different organizations based on their culture, based on the business that they undertake, and based on their employees' comfort with being able to work from anywhere. And I think that's really where things have gotten. Over the last 7 or 8 months, the office, the corporate workplace, the office, has actually probably leapfrogged about 10 years in 10 years forward in its natural evolution, purely based on the fact that we've all had to deal with technology, to deal with working apart, and to understand and to create solutions to be able to continue to practice our businesses, to maintain healthy organizations. And so it's from that perspective, it's been very, very interesting. And at that point, Barry, if you have any final closing comments.
I've just been in the chat trying to respond to a couple of questions as they're coming through, and they were great questions, by the way. Thank you so much. And it was more about the impact of how do we see the open office environment changing potentially going forward, and what do we see as a sort of the new model of what this might be for adaptive space. And I think the response is that we're hearing it's the two drivers are really health and well-being of the individual, and then the resilience and flexibility of the space are the two main components that are required for us. And those are sort of givens as non-negotiables, but where we'll be, we don't know, but we do see things changing. The new normal will be a different environment, as per Joe's comment, and that will impact some companies by a reduction of occupancy, but a change in how people use the space as a destination or as an amenity to attract people to want to come back. So that's what we're hearing from our clients. That's what we're trying to do for ourselves. It's very exciting times in terms of a reinvention. I know it's a challenge in terms of mental and physical, but I think that the outcome will be definitely a much stronger solution than maybe the past model. So that's kind of a summary on it.
Good.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this presentation. It has been incredible to see how you're taking this, you want to world problem, and making it a challenge and making better for all your business, and also encouraging all of us to make maybe our own apps. Who knows? It's really, really cool to see your presentation and how you're managing all this world situation. I don't know if there's any other question, because I saw that you answered them all in the chat. ¿Alguna otra pregunta que quieran poner en el chat? Justo lo puedo traducir. No. That everything is clear as water. Thank you again so much, Joe. I just want to thank you for finding the time to share with us your experience.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Fernando. It's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Have a great
Bye-bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
Muchas gracias a todos por estar en esta presentación. Los invitamos a conectarse a las otras presentaciones que podrán encontrar en recepción. Muchas gracias a todos y tengan un feliz día. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.